people don't want to use the word fear. You know, they call it anxiety, uncertainty, wanting to stay in the comfort zone, all of these kind of things. But we know that change only happens when you get comfortable being uncomfortable. And, I think it was Tony Robbins at one point said the quality of your life is determined by how comfortable you can be being uncomfortable. Quality of your life. Mm-hmm. So think about that for a second. That's huge.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, actually. I think about how hard it is to get uncomfortable. But what you realize is when you're in that space, the growth that you make, right? Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to go there. Like, there are so many things every day that are uncomfortable that we put ourselves into these situations. But I truly believe that's where the most growth happens.
Welcome to Her Unshakable Confidence with dynamic mother-daughter duo Simone and Olivia Knego, where they discuss the secrets of transformation and how to build bold confidence and unwavering resilience. From intimate conversations with inspiring guests to sharing their personal journeys of triumph and challenge, Simone and Olivia create a supportive space where every woman is encouraged to rise above her fears and love the woman in the mirror. Tune into Her Unshakable Confidence and join this special journey of connection and growth. It's like catching up with old friends who inspire you to be bravely and uniquely you.
Welcome to this week's episode of Her Unshakable Confidence. I'm Simone Knego.
And I'm Olivia Knego.
And today we have a very exciting guest. Jacqueline Wales is the author of The Fearless Factor at Work, When the Crow Sings, which is a novel, and the creator of Transformational Strategies for Success, comprehensive programs designed to enhance self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and communication skills. Jacqueline has explored human behavior and asked tough questions for more than 35 years and says she is unapologetically raw and real, which is exactly why we want her here today. She is also a professional speaker whose TEDx talk, Unleash the Power of Fear, The Secret to Success and Happiness, has been viewed by over 6,000 people, probably way more at this point. On top of all that, she is also a professionally trained singer. Maybe she'll sing for us today. And global nomad who has lived and traveled on 3 continents, earned a black belt in karate, enjoys CrossFit style workouts, and is an active co-partner in a long-term marriage and mother of 4 children and 3 granddaughters. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to dive into everything about your brand, which is really all about fear. So kind of talk to us how you came to this part in your life where this was like the big thing that you wanted to focus on. Obviously, it's a big thing in everybody's life, but kind of want to get a little bit more history on that.
It was kind of accidental in some ways. I was in coaching at the time, and I was in a transition period in my life, and I really didn't know what the next step was going to be. And it was my coach who said to me, with everything you've gone through in your lifetime, with all your experiences of great uncertainty, fear has been a big deal. And you've had to really overcome a great many of those challenges. So why don't you speak to that issue and share that with people that you might want to coach? And so the journey kind of began at that point. And right now it's been 18 years since I embarked on that so-called professional journey of bringing fear to, the understanding that we can, in fact, move beyond it and we'll get into that in a little bit, but my life was really replete with a lot of fear. From the very earliest day. In fact, I like to say I'm at the age of almost 73. I've been dealing with fear for about 70 years. Now that tells you something about my background. And fear was something I became very acquainted with at a very young age. And it dominated my thinking, my behavior, and there was a lot of self-sabotage along the way as well. So I now teach what I've learned over a lifetime of what this particular emotion, and let's not get confused about it being anything other than that. It's an emotion, and that we attach a story to it. And most of the stories that we attach to it have no foundation in reality.
And do you feel like that's why it's such a big force in holding us back, that we attach that story to it? Because if the definition of fear itself, I mean, I don't know if that would really cause us to say, oh, we have to stop everything for it. But is it that story that we attach to it? Do you think that holds us back so much?
I think it does. And here's the other thing. It can also be circumstances that create fear-based thinking. But I think that when we attach the uncertainty of life in general to the fear of whatever it is. And I'm not talking about phobias here. I'm talking about a very different type of reaction, which, as I said, is very story oriented. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a narration of our lives if we're not careful. And that is all about, playing small, living in self-doubt, not wanting to take risks. There's all kinds of ways in which this plays out. The fear of failure, the fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of humiliation. The fear of success also is a double-sided sword with the fear of failure. So these are all elements that I think everyone is acquainted with to some degree, but for many people, it holds them back in significant ways. The fear of speaking up, the fear of making decisions. These are all the different ways in which fear manifests in life. And I certainly managed to live a great deal of it myself.
Do you think, going off the idea that fear is inherently different than phobias, is there anyone out there that really experiences no fear?
I'm not sure I caught that one, Olivia, because I think, again, I'm dealing with sound issues here. So I think I heard you say that fear as a phobia is one thing, but does that mean there's no fear? Is that your...
Or is there anybody that experiences no fear? Is there anyone out there that is truly fearless?
Some people would say they don't. I meet people who tell me that they thrive on risk. I just think of a conversation I had recently with a guy, and he's a serial entrepreneur. Now, to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be comfortable with risk, and he goes chasing it. So that's fairly fearless person. But I would think if we're talking about the average individual, then we're going to scratch the surface of things, And here's the other thing. People don't want to use the word fear. They call it anxiety, uncertainty, wanting to stay in the comfort zone, all of these kind of things. But we know that change only happens when you get comfortable being uncomfortable. And, I think it was Tony Robbins at one point said the quality of your life is determined by how comfortable you can be being uncomfortable. Quality of your life. Mm-hmm. So think about that for a second. That's huge.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, actually. I think about how hard it is to get uncomfortable. But what you realize is when you're in that space, the growth that you make, right? Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to go there. Like, there are so many things every day that are uncomfortable that we put ourselves into these situations. But I truly believe that's where the most growth happens. And when I think about fear, I think about, you're right. Like we put all these different labels, and people don't like to say the word fear. People also don't. So I talk a lot about self-doubt and confidence. People don't like to say that they're not confident, right? Because that's uncomfortable in itself. And so I think we do have a lot of fears that we don't talk about. I mean, I would say I have one phobia, which is spiders. But I do have a lot of fears, right? I have every day, I probably wake up and I have to say, okay, push that aside. And so when you're thinking about fear, like what strategies do you use with people to say, okay, here's how to stay centered. Here's how to get uncomfortable so that you can make these incredible strides.
So here's the first thing I will always say is ask yourself a very fundamental question. Are my fears real? Do I have empirical evidence that this fear will absolutely manifest for whatever reason? Now, You might think it does, but again, do you have the evidence? If you don't, then it's simply the barrier that you put in your own way. And that's a very interesting point to think about. And certainly I was very good at getting in my own way and really believing that I wasn't going to amount to much. My father told me that for years, I would never amount to much. And that I wasn't smart enough and I wasn't capable and I wasn't, you put the adjectives there. There was all kinds of negative self-talk. And that's the other side of this. You have to notice when negative self-talk steps in, when that self-judgment and criticism becomes the guiding light of who you are and how you manage to walk through the world. And when we think about that, that's the, I think it's the positive intelligence guy, Shamin shares, well, I can't even pronounce his last name. But anyways, he talks about the saboteurs. And I would tend to agree. We all have an inner critic, a judge that wants to sit there in the high mighty and tell you why you are not good enough, why you don't deserve it, why you don't really get what you want. There's all kinds of ways in which that messaging sets you up for failure, frankly. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thinking about confronting your fears, and what's the hardest thing that you've ever done? I mean, I know a lot of your stories. So if you could boil it down to, if you thought back on your past and said, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I was able to overcome this. This was the thing I was most afraid of. And this is where I am now.
Well, as you know, you know a lot of my story, and I have quite a few episodes of that nature.
Yes.
I think if I really, really kind of nail it at this point, there's a lot of points, but I remember the first time I stepped onto a stage during the Jewish high holidays, and I was asked to sing. And I had already taken voice lessons, as you said, professionally trained singer, but the confidence was lacking to really push myself out there and take that risk. But the rabbi came and said, we need a cantor for the high holidays. And I said, well, what do I know about Jewish liturgy? He said, you can learn. And so I said, what kind of melodies do you want? He said, just go find melodies that speak to you. They'll be fine. It was a small community, so it didn't matter. It wasn't exactly, Park Avenue Synagogue in New York. This was in Paris, France. So anyways, I went away 3.5 months later after I had slept, breathed, and ate basically to the sound of Jewish liturgy, because I didn't read Hebrew and I didn't read music. So I had to take everything in by ear and I had to learn everything in transliteration. And then I showed up for Rosh Hashanah services. And I showed up for Rosh Hashanah services after having gone to my voice teacher and said, put this in my key, because these particular melodies, I had no accompaniment. It was all a cappella, and you can't hide anything. So I show up on Rosh Hashanah with a little MP3 player. We may remember it. We're old enough for those.
Yes.
And I have an MP3 player and I have an earbud. And I'm listening to myself in the key that I'm singing in whilst I'm delivering the first Rosh Hashanah service. Well, that went reasonably well. I walked away from the podium a couple of times and it fell to the floor, but what the hell? Nobody seemed to notice anything dramatic. But that was really, talk about fear. I went to the toilet 3 times before I actually got on that stage. So, that gives you an idea of the amount of trepidation and fear I had about it. But I went on to do that for nearly 5 years, both in Paris and then in Amsterdam. So it was quite a deal, but that's the facing of the fears piece. It's like, I can't do this. But then again, because of my uncertainty, and it's prevalent in almost everything that I've done up to this point, I over-deliver. I never do anything half-assed. I'm a 50%er. because the uncertainty, the insecurity of, will people like it? And I spent a great deal of my life wanting to be liked and wanting to prove that I was good enough. And that's another big syndrome of the fear piece, is you need to prove that you're okay, to be validated. And as someone once told me, you will never feel whole until you stop the need to be validated. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you the number of clients I've had that are very approval driven and perfectionists. They generally go hand in hand.
And do you believe, because I'm asking you, but I'm saying what I believe, is that it has to come from within, right? And I don't need someone else to tell me that, oh, they think I look pretty or that they think I did an amazing job. I want to feel it myself. Like when I get up on a stage and I rock it, I'm like, that was amazing. I did a great job. And I don't need to hear other people come up to me. Sure, it's nice, but I don't need that validation anymore, which I did need for many, many years.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I'm the same way right now. I've got to a point in my life now where I go, you like it, you don't like it, I don't give a shit. One way or another, there you go. I know I'm doing a good job. I know my stuff, and I know how to deliver. And that's all that's necessary. And like you said, you get up on the stage and you let it go however it is. I mean, I did this TED Talk. Now, this was only last year. And I have to tell you, I've had a lot of great reviews on it. But frankly, I got on that thing. And when I looked at it afterwards, I was like, God, you look really nervous. Nobody noticed.
Right.
But
Yeah,
I did.
we're our harshest critics.
How did you feel, though?
So, yeah, I think that there is this piece that you gain an inner peace with yourself. And when you've lived as long as I have, and maybe for you too, we've done enough extraordinary things in our life. I know a little bit about your background too, with climbing mountains and so forth. But, we've done enough stuff that other people look at us and go, God, I'd never go there.
Right.
I've climbed mountains, I've hiked mountains, but they were day journeys compared to the one you made. But, there's definitely that piece where people do look at you and go, I couldn't do what you've done, Well, that's where we take the pride in it.
Yeah. But, a lot of people will say that to me, like, oh, I could never do that. And then my question is, well, would you want to? No, I wouldn't want to. Okay, change your words, because if you don't want to do something, that's completely different than you can't do it. And something that I really try to instill in my kids, Olivia included, is that the importance of using your words and the importance of really, when we talk about something like fear, that being able to understand that these outside influences are affecting us and that we are the ones that are able to control it. We can control that voice inside our head. We can make these changes so that we can understand what's happening instead of just saying, oh, I'm too afraid, I can't do this, or I can't get up on the stage because, ooh, that's scary.
Yeah, and I think one has to really notice the language that you use on yourself. This is really a key point too, is that you have to be mindful of the words that are coming out of your mouth, because that's what you are giving to other people. So if you want to create a good impression, the last thing you want to do is tell them you don't deserve it, which is a lot of what happens when you undermine yourself. Women specifically are the worst for it. And I know this because I was the same way, and you could probably relate to at a certain point in your life. We walk around apologizing for our existence. And I like to say, I don't need to apologize for anything at this point. We've all got points in our life we're not particularly proud of. But at the same time, what did we learn? And I think the learning piece is really what really captivates me. I mean, I'm still learning every single day. I've been learning about neuroscience for the last year. And it's fascinating in terms of how the brain is operating so that, these emotions get spilled out one way or another, whether it's fear, joy, sadness, grief, whatever it is, and again, what are we attaching to it? Because, in the Buddhist tradition, it's about surrendering to what is. And that's something that I 100% agree with, is that, when we can learn to surrender to what is with greater self-compassion. Self-compassion is a big one, especially for people who are really hard on themselves. How do you forgive yourself for not meeting your standards, not necessarily someone else's? But then that brings up the fear of living my life according to what other people want from me, as opposed to living my life according to what I want from myself.
So true. Okay, let's see if your microphone's doing any better. But I'm curious, for Olivia, for your generation, I mean, do you feel like you still have those same things with fear? I mean, I know we talk about fear all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is it any better at all?
Yeah, I think it's better.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I messed with something over here. I feel like even today, I kind of lived my entire day in fear. My first class of the morning was essentially, you guys need to start looking for jobs. And I don't know where I'm going to be in a month. I don't know where I'm going to be in 6 months. And the fear of the unknown is kind of ever present in my life. And then I also kind of have the fear of the past as well. Did I make the right decisions, or did I do things, whether good or bad, that will haunt me later in life, that'll come back and bite me? And honestly, that one I think is what really weighs on me, because it's not controllable. I can't go back and fix it. And that's what keeps me up at night.
So you bring up a really interesting point on this, because fear primarily is based on what happened in the past might happen again in the future. And then we take a lot of our energy from this present moment and we invest in the what ifs of something going negatively in the future based on something that might have happened in the past. Now, if we were to take that energy, and it's energy that we're talking about here, and we use it in terms of, well, let me wait and see when I get down the road, if indeed that's the truth, because to the point that I made earlier, you don't have any empirical evidence that indeed will be the impact that you can see in the future. And let's face it, you will be a different person in the future, because we are always evolving. So therefore, will you handle it differently? Should it reoccur? The answer is yes. So why would you want to worry about it for the future?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're like grandma and you want to worry about everything.
Well, it's a weird split, because the way I can get through my days, which are long and filled with work, is, okay, well, it's just one day at a time. But if I start to think about what's next week going to look like, what's next month, that's when I get that sense of fear. But also it's kind of a double-edged sword of, if I don't think about it, what's going to happen?
Yeah, well, why not just create a different scenario for yourself? So yeah, you don't know where your next job is coming from. You don't know whether you're going to have enough money to pay the rent. You don't know whether you're going to have a wonderful, loving relationship in the future. I mean, God knows there's enough scenarios to fill a book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or 10, 20 books, frankly. But the point that I'm making here is that you're wasting an awful lot of energy worrying about what's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to what I just said, it's not going to happen. And even if it does happen, you've built enough resilience around whatever it is so that you can handle it differently. And I think that's part of the maturity of life too, is, if I think back to where I am today, if you flash back to 50 years ago, if anybody had told me I was going to be doing what I'm doing today, I would have gone, yeah, right. Not so much, but here we are, there's just no telling where life is going to lead you. And that's the adventure of it. And as your mother and I both know, we love adventure. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done half the stuff that we've done in lifetime.
Yeah. And I think it's such an important point for everybody listening, is to really understand that your point of that it's not going to happen, right? We have all these fears all day long, that what if this, what if that, and how many of them actually happen, right? The percentage has to probably be minuscule, but we have these in our head all the time, and we waste so much time and energy on them when we could be doing amazing things. and spending more time learning and less time freaking out. Like that is huge right there.
It's absolutely huge. And here's the other thing I want to say. People worry about what other people are thinking.
Yep.
And what I like to say is what other people are thinking is none of your business because you can't get in their heads. And let's face it, it's very ego driven because they must be thinking about me. Well, guess what? No, they're too busy thinking about themselves. So, there's that piece too as well. Oh, I can't do that because what will they think?
They probably won't.
Yeah, they won't be thinking at all. They're like, yeah, okay, you go, girl. Go have at it,
It was honestly the way I was raised. That was something that my parents would say all the time. Oh, what will other people think? And I'm like, I don't think they're thinking about me. And if they are, wow, congratulations on me. But it was constantly a thing. And obviously for them, it wasn't a negative thing. Like, oh my gosh, don't do that. What will other people think? Oh my gosh, don't do that. And we can't live our lives like that, right? I mean, if someone has that much time to pay attention to everything I'm doing, boy, they need a hobby, right? Instead of
well, that's it. You want to say get a life,
right.
But I think that, for me, the message growing up was don't go above your station. I grew up in a working class family, and I was expected to stay in that working class zone. And of course, I took the alternative route, and I left home by the time I was not quite 17 when I moved from Edinburgh, Scotland to London. And that was huge. I mean, talk about fear. I was basically trying to escape the fear and uncertainty that was my home life and, look for something better for myself. But at the time, I didn't know what that better really looked like. I just knew it wasn't where I was born. It needed to be somewhere else. And of course, that led to many years of wandering the globe, in a lot of ways, going from Edinburgh, Scotland to London to then San Francisco. Talk about, big shifts. So there was a lot that took me on that particular journey.
Yeah, I see those big shifts. Sorry, Liv, let me just say one more thing. Yeah. So my oldest daughter right now, she moved to Wales. She's going to be there for 2 years doing a master's in art restoration and conservation. And it doesn't matter that we're still here, like supporting her and doing these things. It's scary, right? You're going into a completely different environment. She doesn't know anyone. I mean, she's meeting people now, and you're on your own. So I can't imagine before you were even 17, making that shift to just kind of going out on your own. And I know people do it, but it's just the experience of it. And I can see why that would be something scary. But I mean, what advice do you have for people who say, I'm changing everything in my life right now, and here's what I'm doing, and I'm not going to let fear control me?
Well, I think it's a lot about, you have to see it this way. You feel like you're jumping off a cliff, but that cliff is actually only a few feet deep, and you're not going to break a leg doing it. So, you will find a way. When I left home at not quite 17 and moved to London, it was with a boyfriend who really didn't treat me well within the first 24 hours. And I then had to go find somewhere to live, find a job, find a bed. And it took me 3 days, and I did it. Wow. So that there's an inner drive that one has to tap into in those tenuous situations. And I don't recommend people leaving home and having no family support at that point in time, because that was my story. And then, of course, I got pregnant and I didn't know who the father was. And so, I tell my parents, and my mother says, don't come home here because you won't get any support. So you're really out in the world on your own, trying to figure it out. So it builds a tremendous resilience within you where, there was an awful lot of anger in me too. And a lot of my anger was, quite frankly, a fuck you attitude. And, I spent my life with that, not my life, but certainly the first part of my life into my 30s, maybe until I started therapy in my mid-30s. Then we started to look at that attitude and realize it wasn't serving me very well. But as one therapist told me, my anger was actually what helped drive me to do something more, to do something different. Because there really was a lot of, you tell me I can't, I will show you. And that anger infused that I will show you, very much so. And again, one doesn't have to go there in order to make changes in one's life or to come to terms with basically how destructive you can be. And a lot of people are very self-destructive, through their drugs or alcohol or relationships or, whatever circumstances that, they'll constantly look around and go, why me? Why do I have to be in this situation? Well, you keep choosing the wrong things. You keep choosing out of fear. And that's a problem.
I interrupted you before, Liv. You go.
Well, I was just thinking one of the reasons I think that people my age really hold fear is that we look at people older than us that appear as though they had everything figured out and they don't experience that fear. And we reflect on, where did I go wrong, or what haven't I done yet? And I guess one of the parts of growing up, and one of the reasons I really enjoy being on this podcast and meeting so many guests, is that I have realized that nobody has a plan, or a plan that's actually followed. And like everyone is just kind of winging it. It's not a best way of saying it, but yeah, like everyone is filled with this fear.
Yeah, and people like to say, I've got it all together. Nobody's got it all together. What does that mean? I mean, as I said, and I say this regularly, we are evolutionary creatures. I just finished watching a 7-part piece on the life on the planet from its inception all the way down through the millions and millions and billions of years to where we are today. And, we as a species are evolutionary. And so you have to see your life in terms of it's an evolution and what's the direction it's taking. Well, we're not always clear on that. But one thing I do know for sure is if you show up and you're willing to look in the mirror and you're willing to look at all the warts and everything else that goes along with it, you will surprise yourself with how wonderful you really are without all the baggage attached. And that's absolutely true. I have a 6-month program I take people through, and I watch them transform as they start getting clear on who am I, what is it that matters to me, and where is it I think I'm going. And this is just one part of their journey.
Yeah, which I've heard a lot about your program, and I congratulate you because I think it really makes such a difference in so many people's lives. I look at Olivia and I think, yeah, she thinks we have it all together, right? I mean, we're evolving all the time. We're learning all the time, and never look at someone else and think, oh, they have it all together. And that's that comparison piece where we don't need to look at anybody else to get our justification for doing anything in our lives, and understand that everyone is struggling with something that we don't know anything about. And so when you look at someone, a celebrity, someone that is, all over the news for doing these amazing things, I guarantee at night they look in the mirror and think, oh my gosh, that was such a hard day. That was such a struggle. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I had to get out there in front of all those people. And I think it's a reminder for all of us that we don't know what anybody else is going through, and we need to stop being so hard on ourselves.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that I do. I think I mentioned, I do behavioral assessments for companies where we really measure behavior in individuals. And people who have high competitive behaviors, they're very much about comparing themselves to others because they need to win. And if I'm comparing myself to others, it's a driver for me to win. And I often quote the Oscar Wilde thing about, be yourself because everybody else is taken. And I think this can be a very detrimental thing when you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. And I think the social media age that we live in right now has exacerbated that big time. And I think it's unfortunate for young women and men also to be looking at those role models and thinking, well, they have it all because they've got the fame, they've got the money, they've got the status, they're all out there. But you scratch the surface of a lot of these people and their insecurities are loud and obnoxious. And that's the need to show you, I'm really the best thing out there. Yeah.
How do you not compare yourself against people when you are in a competitive environment?
I think, again, it comes back to what we said earlier, the security in self. I know who I am. I know what matters to me. And I'm not going to be swayed from that by someone else's opinion of who they think I should be. And I talk about, the woulda, coulda, shoulda trolls. And they're like, they're under the bridge waiting for the billy goat gruff to go over. And that billy goat gruff is the insecurity. And the woulda, coulda, shouldas will destroy you every time. So you've got to really think about that particular aspect of things too. So again, how do you avoid comparing yourself to others? Just remember, you're not them.
So let's tie it back into confidence, because obviously that's my big thing, is talking about building unshakable confidence. But I do believe there's a huge correlation between fear and confidence, fear and self-doubt. What does confidence mean to you? And talk to me about your thoughts of the connection between fear and confidence.
So being fearless is something I talk about. And being fearless is not the absence of fear, but it's the courage to take the next step. And when we take the courage to really address some of the insecurity we might be feeling and know that we can handle it, because fear is our belief that we cannot handle whatever comes our way, that's confidence right there. So if I don't want to believe my bullshit, stories I tell myself, and I'm willing to create a new narrative that says I'm valued, I deserve what I've got, I've earned what I've got, and I know how to walk through the world confidently as myself, then that's really what it's all about. So the confidence to be able to speak up for what you need and want, the confidence to be able to state your opinion on something, even if you're wrong, because you might be. And, there's always a 50-50 chance you might not be right. But the willingness to be able to step into the I don't know becomes a big part of the confidence factor. And not hiding behind self-doubt, not hiding behind not speaking up, not hiding behind other people because they might know more than you do. Be informed, be knowledgeable, but most importantly, know yourself. I mean, Aristotle said it very clearly back when, many, many centuries ago, know thyself, and that hasn't changed any. I think that's still a prime driver of how we live a good life, a life that we can feel satisfied with and enriched by, because I know who I am.
And I love saying that I think it's so important that we do the things that we think we can't. So we have this, this voice inside our head that says, oh, you're not capable of that, or you're not enough for that. And that's where I challenge everyone to say, yes, you are. Do the things that you think you can't. Climb that mountain, run that race, write that book, all the things that you've told yourself for so long that you don't think you can do. And that really is about stepping through that fear, moving past that fear, and proving to yourself what you're capable of, not to anybody else. I don't care what anybody else is thinking, but what you're thinking of yourself.
Yeah.
And I think
Maya
that really
Angelou said that, there's a choice between hope and fear. Which one do you want to choose?
And I really think
will always go on the side of fear, of hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really think that all ties back into, you don't have empirical evidence that you can't do this. So until you do, you have to try and do it.
Yeah. And if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing I hear again and again. What's your greatest fear? Failure. Okay, great. So what is failure? But a choice, a decision, or an expectation that did not go the way you had planned. Did it kill you? No.
Nope.
Did it ruin your life? Maybe for a little bit. Otherwise, go again. It's a next question, so that didn't work out. So what's next? What did you learn from it? That's another big piece of that fear of failure piece that I hear a lot. And then I also say to them, so if you look at your failures, what did they inform for you to be successful? Oh yeah, well, it had an impact because I don't go that way, go this way. And I like to say I've been blessed with a lot of people in my life who said, don't go that way, go this way, because that's the other side of this kind of work. You need good people you can rely on. You need mentors, you need advisors, you need people who have your best interests at heart and who are willing to call you on your bullshit. And you've been blessed, Olivia, with a mother who's quite happy to do that.
Oh, yes.
And, probably with some minor holding backs there, but nevertheless.
Sometimes.
Yes, yes. But there is a piece here. My kids, they're all adults now, but, they're not interested in listening to me. Once in a while, they go, yeah, Ma, I get it. But other than that, most of the time they have no idea what I do for a living, frankly. But there it is. That's their choice. But they're doing all right. They got their own lives.
I'm a big believer in embracing your failures. And what you just said about like the number one, I don't know if you said the number one, but when you ask people, what are they afraid of failure? What are a couple other things that I know you did a lot of interviews. You were doing a lot of, research with women. I believe it was CEOs, high achieving women who you were interviewing them. And I'm just curious, like, what were the top 3 fears that women have that you found?
Number 1 is speaking up.
Okay.
They allowed other people to take the lead and they stayed quiet, or they allowed other people to steal their ideas and they remained quiet. And when they look back on it, they wish they had been a little bit more vocal and had been more courageous in stepping up for what they wanted. What they also allowed for a lot of the time was that their male counterparts were the ones who were getting all the opportunities, and they didn't step in and make sure that they understood their value. And that was another side of it. So I would say those 2 things for sure come up. And then you meet people who go, yeah, I know there was a lot of bullshit out there and I kind of, railed against it and stood up. But they will also say there was a time in my life when I allowed other people to make decisions for me. And that was detrimental.
My son is doing a paper right now on empowering women. And so he's interviewing me for it, which kind of cracks me up. But he not cracks me up. I'm like, oh, that's such an honor. I think he just doesn't want to find someone else to interview. So, boy, did I give him an earful.
That sounds very deprecating.
I know. But I'm saying that he didn't know what he was getting himself into, because I gave him the whole earful of, the way I started, the things I struggled with, and then why I'm so passionate now about helping other women realize what they're capable of, not putting up with the bullshit and really speaking your voice, speaking your mind. And so he's like, whoo, I got myself into more than I thought I was. I was like, there you go. You thought it was going to be a little simple interview. Yeah, simple interview. Not so simple.
No.
So one last question before we Olivia does, I didn't tell you about this, but Olivia does this little fun thing at the end where she reads from this fabulous calendar. So, but I know we kind of asked this in the introductory questions, but do you have a piece of advice that somebody gave you? We typically say, like, is there a great piece of advice that a woman gave you in your life, whether it's good or bad? Maybe like, here, don't do this. I mean, I tell Olivia all the time, I give you the best advice. You got to listen to it. But is there something that a woman said to you in your life that you thought, oh my gosh, that was the best advice ever? Or you know what? Boy, that was the worst advice ever.
The one thing that comes to mind right now is a good friend of mine said to me at one point, stop hiding. Stop hiding. Because you have a big personality and you need to bring it out. You need to let other people see it. And that, I think, was a real eye-opener for me. It's like I felt like I was showing up in the world and I was doing some pretty good stuff. But she saw it and she said, stop hiding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's such a good reminder. And I think that we all tend to hide at certain points in our lives, right? Even when we think we're putting ourselves totally out there, I think there's more that we can do.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like, especially the last couple of years, there's been enormous growth on my part to stop hiding. And, the confidence that I've gained, even, as I said, in the last 2 or 3 years, COVID years were a little rough, but you and I met when we were doing a public speaking program.
Yes.
And
during the COVID years.
During the COVID years. And I think it was a good thing for me because it helped me to stop hiding, because we had to present these keynotes and everybody got to hear them again and again.
Yes.
And, you get to live your story and bring it out. And that was where you and I really connected, because we both saw that whilst you climbed the physical mountains, I climbed the internal mountains. And I often think about my journey of I hiked a lot of mountains when I was, with the family when we were younger. And it's, how do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. And growth is like that. It's one step at a time. It's not about, how far can I go? It's simply about what can I do today that will help me tomorrow. And it became my mantra, is about, I'm going to show up today the best I can and take action for tomorrow. So I'm not worried about the future, because I know that my actions today will lead me for tomorrow, and then tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And that's a big piece of it. Yeah.
And I think that's huge, because I think we tend to overthink things and we tend to make things bigger. Oh, we've got to accomplish all of this, Take that one step forward. Just take that one step forward and then move on from there.
I think you're going to love my quote of the day then.
Okay. Tell me. Hold on a second. So this calendar is called the Unfuck Yourself calendar. And it was a gift I gave her 2 years ago, and we keep on renewing it. And she's like, have you ordered next year's calendar yet? And it gives great advice every time. And typically when we read it on a show, it typically kind of connects to what we're talking about. So let's see how it connects today.
When you're not in the mood to go to work or to take a significant step in life, when you're doubting yourself too much to get started, forget all of it. Just take that first step, and the next one, and the next one.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And here's the other thing I would say. For today, I have what I need. For today, I am enough. And I'm taking action for tomorrow. That's a quote from me to you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for joining us today. Please tell everybody where they can find you, any programs that you want to tell them about, and we'll put everything in the show notes as well.
Great. So I'm at JacquelineWales.com. So, not difficult to find. And my programs are all mostly online, and all the details are on the website. And currently I'm doing a 30-day fear-busting challenge, which I'm very excited about. And, small groups bringing people together. So that's a big one. But I've got 4 programs online. Most of my work is focused towards the corporate sector. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Jacqueline at JacquelineWales.com, and I'll be happy to answer you.
Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Her Unshakeable Confidence. If you like this episode, please share it. Please leave a review. Please leave a comment so we can know what you want from us in the future. And thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Always remember, you are unshakable.
Thank you for listening to Her Unshakable Confidence with Simone and Olivia Knego. We hope this episode has made your day just a little bit brighter and given you the inspiration you need to confidently go about your week. Always remember to be authentically you. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And feel free to connect with them on Instagram at Simone Knego and at Olivia Knego. Till next time.